So when I mentioned to you that this was my final year, another way of being the senior rabbi here at Sinai, another way I could have said that is that I am old enough that I read the obituaries. And each morning when the newspaper comes, and I'm old enough that I still get a newspaper in the morning, I read them, and 2 days ago, my eye was caught by an obituary that said, Ilsa, Nathan, and Ruth Ziegler, sisters and survivors, die 11 days apart. And these were the first 3 paragraphs. One day in 1944 at Birkenau concentration camp in German-occupied Poland, Ilse and Ruth Schur saw their father for the last time. You two are young. Maybe you'll survive, Jacob Schur told them. He raised his hands towards their heads, and in a voice choked with emotion, he gave them a Hebrew blessing. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, Ye'er Hashem panav elecha v'yichuneka, Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God bless you and keep you. May God's countenance shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God be with you and grant you peace. The last paragraph of the obituary reads as follows. She recalled those last moments with her father in Birkenau. I did not know it at the time, she said, but my father's blessing would have to last a lifetime. As soon as I read that, I knew that that was my message on this Rosh Hashanah. You may not realize it, but that blessing happens to be the oldest bit of Torah we have in the world. Because about 40 years ago, some archaeologists were digging outside of Jerusalem, and the valley outside of Jerusalem is called Gehenna, which in Judaism is synonymous for hell. And the reason that it was called Gehenna is that's where Canaanites sacrificed children, and Jews couldn't imagine a worse place, so they called it hell was Gehenna, Gehinnom, the valley of Hinnom. And they found these rolled up silver amulets, and when they opened them, it had that blessing, which means that the oldest bit of Torah we have in the world, just like their father, was a blessing of peace that was snatched from hell. That's our legacy to the world. In the Talmud, there's an argument about the plague of darkness in Egypt, and one rabbi says, obviously the plague of darkness came from Gehenna, it came from below, and the other rabbi says, no, it came from above. Because darkness contains its own blessing. And the ability to get blessing out of darkness, out of pain, out of difficulty, out of suffering, that is, if anything is, the Jewish gift to the world. And the Jewish gift to the Jewish people. The fact that they survived and that they kept their father's blessing in their hearts and that they gave it then to the world even after they were gone. So that it was given to me and I just gave it to you. Imagine what Jacob Schur would think if he could know that 70 years later, a congregation of Jews would hear his blessing to his daughters in his final moments. Now I know that some of you may believe that this all depends on what you believe. And so I want to close with one more story. And I want you to know that this lesson and this story is not written, even though it's in a book, because Shneur Zalman of Liadi, one of the great thinkers of the Hasidic movement, said there are 2 kinds of writing in the Jewish tradition. There's Ktiva and Chakika. One is writing, and the other is engraving. Writing, he said, is words on a page, and if you take the ink away, the page is blank. But engraving, like the engraving of the 10 Commandments here, it becomes part of the fabric. You can't take engraved writing away without destroying everything. And this lesson is not written, it's engraved. I quote Elie Wiesel. It happened in a camp. The officer tried to convince one of the inmates to repudiate God. He said, "I will give you bread," and the man said no. He said, "Repudiate your God, curse your God, and I will give you happiness, joy." He said no. Finally, the officer said, "Curse your God, and I will give you life." He said no. So the officer shot him. And the man still said no. He shot him with 5 bullets, and in his agony, the man kept on saying, "Adonai hu ha'Elohim," the ancient call of our martyrs, God is God, God alone is God, and then he died. The son told me the story. The son said, "You know, my father was not a believer." It is engraved in our hearts. We will steal blessing from darkness, and the world cannot get so dark that we will not see the blessing. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and keep you. Yair Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka. May God's countenance shine upon you, and may God always be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God lift God's presence up before you and grant you all lives of blessing, of promise, and of peace.